Hi everybody, this is Christie. I am the Intimate Warrior. I thank you so much for stopping by, and as always, I send you love. Today's video is going to be a little different, but it's still going to be the same. I don't usually talk about world events like some of the other influencers here on social media. And so I'm not going to spend, I guess, too much time here on that. You probably know what's going on in the news about the bridge. And again, I am not going to spend a lot of time on that. But I used to, and I kind of still am. I love it. I love conspiracies. I really do. But everything is a conspiracy, right? Anything with whatever's going on in this reality, it's either going to do two things to you. There's two things that can happen. It either is going to suppress you or it's going to liberate you. But honestly, nothing in this reality is of any use to you. Especially things that are outside of our control. Your reality where you currently are is the only reality that you should be focused on. And that means that you should only be seeing that reflection. If you see that reflection for its truth, that it is there for you and not happening to you, you will learn from it. Everybody who is seeing what is going on right now, it's either two people. There's either two sides. Those who are now living in more fear, anxiety, being weighed down and disconnected, or those who, see it as still a conspiracy, or this is called a woke, right? Being here, and I don't even know what that kind of means to this reality because it doesn't make any sense. People think they're waking up to something, yet you're still waking up to from a fear-based reality. You're still, look at what the government's doing, look at what everybody's doing, look at what all these groups are doing to cover up, and these blood rituals and this and that, and it's still, what is it still doing to you? It's still taking you away from truth. And so, but this side here is going to convince you, oh, Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming, people, brace yourself here, but let's keep spreading this gossip, this blasphemy, and we're still going to create more fear and anxiety in people. There's a symbolism in every single thing that takes place in our reality. The bridge, okay? A bridge has collapsed. You can go either way that you want. Remember, the path that we are on is the path to goodness or the path of bad or evil. The path of purity or the path of impurity. No ifs, ands, or buts. There's no other way around it. You cannot reach source, your higher self. You can't see Christ. Christ can't become embedded within you if you are on a path to destruction. So if you see anything in your reality that is giving you, oh my gosh, it's the end of world times and that fear, oh my goodness, well, you're not seeing the proper reflection. And you know what? If you are still having that fear inside of you and you see it, awesome, please continue to see yourself. See your reaction. See your reaction. And still move forward with love. Love is Christ. We don't get to the Father without having Christ within ourselves. Love, the purest form of love. And you are going to have to learn to develop that purity of love. Purity. And remember, the tree, we have two paths. Purity and impurity. Good and evil. That's what it's about. But it's always an inward journey. So the only bridge that we should be focused on is the bridge from the lower waters to the high, the lower state of being to the higher state of existing. And that is our spinal canal. The true bridge within us, which is the and, which is the vav of the Hebrew alphabet. The true connection to higher states of being is your spinal canal. And purifying yourself allows the opening of that canal to where if you are in purity, eventually that canal is going to constantly flow up and down, a greater connection within you. But more importantly, though, what does that even mean? It means that you have birthed life within you. Birthed life. And this actually works great with what I am going to attempt to talk about today. What did I write this morning? Well, my husband and I were sitting downstairs this morning. Sometimes we get up really early, or he does more specifically, and I go down and I join him eventually, and we watch a few minutes of television. And he ends up changing the channel to the news. And I was like, can you just imagine being on that bridge? Especially if you have your family, and in my mind, I'm thinking of my little granddaughter. We're just normally talking about it, and I try not to feed into that. I don't watch the news. Only time I watch it is when we're together. But in my mind, in my heart, although I was just mentioning it that way, can you imagine? So I was, being in a state of calmness, speaking. And I don't know how my husband took it, but of course, I guess I should have been more mindful of my phrasing anyway. And again, I try not to talk too much about reality, but it does come up. And although I don't try to talk about it a lot, but we do, of course, like today, I did speak about that, and it's good to see his perspective. And then when he gives me his perspective, I can also see how I react. So it still is a lesson. It is a dialogue that still can teach you about who you currently are. And of course, when someone else responds back, they can teach you again who you really are, who you think you are, and who you really are. So as I was saying that, I was actually living in a state of gratefulness and love. There was no real anxiety or fear living in my phrasing or in the tone of my phrasing. So he really didn't have a reaction, which was awesome. So that meant that I didn't have to have a reaction myself. So something that I spoke about was in a positive tone. He responded positively, or without even a response, really. Therefore, the third action is still in a positive state of mind. 3 things that were positive. What we are trying to do is have more positive atoms, more positive energy within us than we have of negative energy. The more positivity that you have inside, the cleansing process that takes place within you, it purifies you to the point that you are in more positive than negative elements. It's all about the elements inside of us. But then I started thinking about this being blessed and grateful. When you are truly blessed and grateful, and I mean you really are, because everybody talks about, oh yeah, I'm grateful. Yeah, gosh, I'm grateful. But this. Oh yeah, I am so blessed in my life. And then what do they turn around and do? And they just complain, low energy, just angry. And you're like, well, wait a minute. A few minutes ago, you just told me how blessed and grateful you are, but here you are complaining about your life and nothing great happens to you. So what are you talking about? People are delusional, living in a state of cover up. People are unaware of what they really think and how they really feel because we cover up. And this links into a video that I made yesterday. But I don't know which order I'm going to be putting it in now because this is highly significant for what's going on in our reality. And I guess I really should keep it in order, just because you have to understand where we currently are. And so even though I am not specifically mentioning like, what's taking place astrologically or in reality, except in this video I'm mentioning the bridge, it still works with the current state that we are experiencing, because we are all projecting it. It's all a projection. And if you are in a negative mindset, you are going to, of course, project something. This is how you can also see your state of mind. How reactive are you when you see certain news things, certain events that take place that are very traumatic, right? How are you reacting? Well, that's reactive inside of you, which means it should be cleansed and purified within yourself. And this is how God knows your truth at all times. You can say you're grateful or in faith or love Jesus or believe in Jesus and love God with all of your mind, heart, and body, but your heart always tells the truth because you're a state of emotion. If you are somebody who truly is grateful and truly imagine, if you are always grateful, if you feel really blessed in your life, it means that you know all the riches that are coming into your life, into your heart, into your soul. Not that you're lucky that people are always giving you gifts and doing things for you. Of course, it becomes awesome to still show you that, oh yeah, you are blessed. People do love you. But there's a blessing and a gratefulness that comes inside of us that isn't given by another individual. That's truly blessed. Truly gratefulness. That you know that God is your giver. But yet, God can take it away in any moment, depending on your state of being. Just like Job, he experienced every single thing being taken from him, and yet at the very end, bowing down to God still and feeling blessed and grateful. Even in your worst moments of life, you can be in a state of gratefulness and blessed and feeling blessed. And that's what you have to get to. You have to get to that state. And that state is always going to free up space in your life to give selflessly. Yet, though, because we are humans with such toxicity within us and impurity, that even when we are still when we're still feeling blessed, it can still hurt when we are constantly giving. That's because we are not whole yet. We're not whole. We are not completely purified to feel complete. It's still the process. But training your mind and training your emotions and training your actions, because you're trying to train yourself to always see Christ and God. And you have to figure out what that is. So if you don't understand what that means, you have to learn. You have to develop what faith is within you. You have to develop what pure love is within you. Just like you, and that means you have to develop gratefulness and the feeling of blessed, of feeling blessed. And when you do that constant giving, it becomes an automatic response, because light's giving to you. God's wisdom and love is being handed down to you through your walk, and you can constantly give out without having an expectation of receiving back. And I've mentioned that over and over again in all of my videos through all of these years that I've been here on YouTube. But I also tell you my stories of how difficult it is and my hardships in relationship to wanting to feel loved and accepted and needed and seen by other individuals. But that's my impurity. That's all about my impurity and my process to becoming purified. So the bridge, again, it is your evolve, but at a higher connection here, because we can't get to God without Christ, without noon. Noon is the 14th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And what was that I was going to share about the 14? I'm going to push pause and do some research. I forget. Okay, and it is about the 14 generations that are often mentioned in the Bible, and 14 is in relationship to the noon, the 14th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And so noon represents the fish, which Jesus is also known as the fish. He works with fish, manifests the fish, and bread, of course, and also wine, all in relationship to Jesus. But the fish has to have water to swim in. And more specifically, it has to have a waterway that has been purified, developed within its purity, which means that you have to be able to walk upon that water. And that's the development of the soul that takes place within us. And also in one of my videos, I mentioned about the meat and the maw video, I believe. And what that signifies. That's the higher heaven, the fiery waters through knowledge, and then, or superior, and then inferior waters. The two mems that coordinate. But there's two noons as well. Because you have to have the fish. Jesus has to be in the fiery waters, because it's Father, it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, always in threes too. And then Christ has to also be, Jesus, the fish, also has to be in the inferior waters and developed. That waterway, the valve, the bridge, connects the noon to the spinal canal. The fish has to be able to swim from the lower inferior waters to the superior waters, continuously flowing. And eventually, when there is a continuous flow, noon connects you to Teth of the Hebrew alphabet, also is going to create the Semek. So many levels, so many things, and you have to have that understanding within every single thing. To know is to become. So in the noon, you have to have the mem of the waters, purified waters. They have to work hand in hand. That's the mem is the womb of creation that has now developed the seed. And again, that seed has to be developed. And in the Bible, it talks about when Moses received the manna from God to feed the Israelites. You spell manna with a mem and a noon. And this is a type of bread, because Jesus is also the bread, that came from the fiery waters, which means heaven. It's a type of dew and a moisture. And like I said, it's spelt with a mem and a noon. And you can say man if you want. Mem is the water that is from heaven, and then noon is the fish, which symbolizes in relationship to the fish, but of course Christ is symbolized as the fish. But this is also not the manna that the same manna that Christ was also given, because Christ also mentions in the Bible, this is not the same manna that came down from heaven that fed the Israelites in the desert. This one is a far superior manna that we're talking about, that develops the soul. And if you look at the character or the character of Noon and what it looks like, it really resembles a Beth and a calf. So it still works with this. Beth is the house and calf becomes the crown, or works with the crown of the head. It's I've made several videos about that, of speaking about both of these, so hopefully you have heard those. So the first Noon looks and resembles the Beth and the calf, meaning, you know, like the house of the Lord, and then having the crown upon your head. And then the final Noon looks a whole lot like the Vav. That's what I've been talking about, which is that connection, that bridge from one state of mind to another state of being. The Noon, when it is in relationship to the Egyptians, is, of course, the serpent hieroglyph. You spell the word serpent as Nahash, which begins with Noon. Noah also begins with the Noon. And that's something that I told you guys that I have been watching. I don't know, it's been a couple of months. I've been watching Noah. It's one of my other favorite videos. The 10 Commandments being one of them. The thing about the Hebrew letter Noon is that it's also associated with the female renunciate of none here in the English word, which is very ironic and very significant in relationship to it, because it's somebody who is, of course, supposed to be in chastity or in complete purity. And the word Noon, none, also, it means to become degenerated. In Moses, Joshua became in charge after Moses, of course, and Joshua is called the son of Noon. Also, we know that Joshua is the name of Jesus, and he also is the son of Noon. So Noon hides a lot within it, and it can take you again in its opposition or in its positive aspect of it. There's always a positive and a negative to every single thing in life, and this is also another. This is also included in this, in what I am talking about. And wherever your mindset is where it's going to go. That's how it works, your mindset. If you are in a negative mind or a positive mindset. And let's see. So water is spoke about a lot in the Bible, which is in relationship to the flood, and then the river of life also. Nahal is for the flood, and Nahar is for river. The flood, of course, comes from water in relationship to Mem, which coordinate with one another. Noah dealt with the flood, and I told you that Noah already begins with the Noon. So it's the power of the Noon. The fountain that is going to spring out of your bellies, if you follow the Noon or Christ, you shall have the rivers of life. This is what Jesus is talking about in John 4, about the living waters with the Samaritan woman. Whoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. So that also works with what we were talking about, and where we are currently at. We're trying to develop this living water always and continuously. It says in John 7, he that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. And that's something that I know throughout our ascension here, we're going through many symptoms in development. So you will become bloated from time to time. because we have to digest this. So our digestive tract and our bellies are always going to fluctuate. So if you have really cleaned up your diet, eating properly, and I'm not saying not having your sweets 100%. I'm not saying cutting out things that you have enjoyed, but you have learned to develop what it means to truly fuel to live instead of fuel, that causes your eating to live, right? Not living to eat. There's a difference. Fueling yourself. But even in doing the right things for yourself, there comes a time continuously where we're having those symptoms. And purifying yourself, gases take place, or water retention. You get very swollen, and it happens because the elements are trying to balance themselves within you and to bring you life. So there's power within this noon, within our sexual waters, of course, because they're always working together, which is Jesus and the Mother always working side by side, that we can develop the living soul, the Nefesh Kaya, a living soul. That's our goal, to become a living soul, purifying ourselves so much to becoming a purified soul. But the nefes, without life, the spirit or the soul without the life, is the animal soul. So we have to develop life within us, Kai, which works with Chet of the Hebrew alphabet, and Chai means life. You have to develop both male and female energies within yourself and develop the yoke. So through the development of noon and the development of both male and female, like I just says, the nefesh, the animal soul, can receive a new body through Kai, through life. And Chet is spelled with a Chet yod. This comes from God. It's an intellectual animal that receives life, spiritual life, and it has to be earned. It's the sacrifice of chastity, of birth, death, and sacrifice. This is something that cannot, it has to be taught by the soul. And this is what I'm also talking about. It's a deeper state of love and a connection. And it happens within several levels, which connects you to several other Hebrew alphabets. And to really love each other, to connect to one another is such a divine love. And your maturity here, this is through maturity. Knowledge matures you and strengthens you. The problem is that most of us don't see God. We are just a nefesh. We're just, an individual kind of walking around in a zombie-like state who doesn't understand even what God is. We're not developing that relationship is. And that's why, again, this is all connecting to what I have been working with. Seeing God over my own suffering. Seeing God more, that means seeing God in other individuals. How hard is it to see God in other people? How hard is it to see God in situations outside of us? What you're watching on TV, what's in the news. How can you see God more over suffering? If you're seeing suffering, you're seeing evil, impurity, which of course is connection to Satan. And in the Bible, in Genesis 1:21, it talks about God creating the great whales, except it does not actually say whales. It says the great Tanin. And Elohim created great Tanin and every Nefesh Kaya that creeps, which the Mayim brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God saw that it was good. Again, good is about following the path of goodness. And only those who understand this are those who work with all these elements. The Tanin is spelt with a Tav, Nun, Yod, Nun, 2 Nuns. The 2 Nuns that we must develop within ourselves. The Tanin is the crocodile. That helps us. In Exodus 4, it says, "And Jehovah said unto him," which is Moses, "What is in thy hand?" And Moses replies, "A rod." And he cast it upon the ground. And God instructs him, to cast it upon the ground. And so he did. And it became a Nakash. And Moses fled from before it. What's taking place here is that God is actually giving Moses instructions on how to defeat the ego. The Pharaoh signifies Moses's ego. So if you take your rod and you it becomes a serpent. This represents the Kundalini and the power of Shekinah, the Divine Mother, that rises in the spinal column that gives inspiration and power to the prophet to defeat the ego. In Exodus 7:9, when the Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, "Show a miracle for you," then shalt thou say unto Aaron, "Take thy rod and cast it before the Pharaoh, and it shall become a Tanin." So here it is a serpent and then a Tanin. But the difference in the spelling are the Nuns. And the 2 Nuns, and then it contains the Yod, and of course it contains a Tav, which is the seal. And then it continues on, Exodus 2 here, "And there went a man out of the house of Levi, and took a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was good, a good child, she hid him for 3 months," which means a good child, which means that it was born of the tree of knowledge of goodness, not from the tree of evil, not choosing the correct path to purity and of chastity. Purity. It's all about purity. And the 3 months that she hid Moses is highly significant. It's the same thing as when Christ was put into the tomb. Same thing as when Jonah was in the whale. It's all the same thing. So she put him into a boat and floated him down the river. Moses is the one that helps us escape from Egypt. So he has a lot to do with willpower that resides within our heart. So he becomes the human soul that has removed ourselves from suffering. And Moses is the child of Levi. And another name for Moses is Levi Tanin. Moses translates as the great fish, the Leviathan, the great fish. And let's see. So how I have explained, and you guys know this, that everything in our reality and everything inside our mind and our heart has a duality or an opposite, a positive and a negative, if you will. Everything. So, whether it's written in the Bible or other teachings, they think that the Leviathan is often something that's bad. Well, it can be something that is very bad, because if you give it negative energy or you allow this to develop in its negative form, it is the opposite of the Divine Mother. It is Lilith, the whore, that takes you back into hell, yet disguises itself as something that's pure, which is what? False light, right? So our sexual power can cause us harm, cause us to develop a power trip, to control, subdue, to have, to need, to want, developing the ego so strongly, and this is somebody who wants to belong to this earth more than be a child of God. If you know the book of Job, you know that everything was taken from Job. Everything. He suffered greatly. Health, wealth, the family was taken from him. Everything was taken. This is the process of removal of the ego, complete annihilation of the ego. And he bowed before God, feeling blessed through all of that suffering, which means that he has accepted Christ within him. Jonah, now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Again, the belly can develop living waters. So this fish that swallowed Jonah in the belly of the whale, like where Jonah lived in the belly of the whale for three days and 3 nights. Highly significant. Again, this is the tomb. You are in the tomb. You are at the point of annihilating the ego. Now again, this all takes place in levels. And I think that you can probably feel in your path how much progress you have made. You've understood a whole lot. But then you have another experience that shows you, oh, well, I still have this ego intact. Oh, I see. Like I have been going through here. I felt so awesome when I had that awareness of a godly love, especially with my marriage here and understanding what has really been taking place. Awesome. I was giving such blessing, such knowledge, and feeling really blissful, and then kind of like here but not here, and really great. And then to the point of boom, kind of, oh gosh, we have to have that little fall, a little trip, a little stumble, because that little trip and stumble and fall, whatever you want to call it, helps us to still see, oh, something negative is still here and weighing me down. But you can be a person, again, that sees this fall as, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm done with this. It's too hard. I'm not going to go forward. And it's like exercising, Exercising can become a power trip. It can control your life, make you need it more than you need other things in your life, which is what I actually did a long, long time ago. Or it can become something that makes you honor yourself and you honor God. Truly. And it's a flip. And you might say right now that if you are exercising, oh yeah, I am. Because duh, I'm honoring God when I honor my body. The mind, the heart, it feels an energy and it shifts its mindset. Because remember, ego can make you think something and think that it's correct and make you keep going on that path. But then when you fall and you stumble, however long it takes for you to understand something, and you get back up again, you're like, oh my gosh, okay, I understand. My mindset was in a wrong place. My ego was there trying to give me power, control. That's how you know. What are you controlling in your life, and what are you letting go of? So now when I am exercising here, if I get to exercise, because now life is just a flow state. I am honored to be able to do so. I am grateful to be able to do so. So when I am doing it, 9 out of 10 times, because especially since after my dad has passed, I've had a weighing down, being very heavy, kind of, but to do it, and I was focusing so much on the time instead of what I was doing. So that's another thing. How much are you focusing on the time, which is the struggle? Are you focusing more on the struggling of it, or are you focusing on gratefulness of it? So when I am really in grateful mode, honor mode, it's really easy. What am I doing? I'm just getting up. I'm getting on my elliptical. I'm doing the weights, and I'm honoring, and I'm just moving and flowing, and it's a beautiful state. But that also is how it feels with ego. But ego, there's a different tension. There's a tension still. oh gosh, you can still be flowing, but in its negative form because, oh gosh, okay, I know I have an X amount of time here. You're still focusing on the clock, kind of. You're still focusing on suffering. And you can feel the difference, but you have to have that walk again, that experience that shows you, right, okay, I thought I was doing it right here, but all along I wasn't. Like way back when I prayed to God and I said, please heal my marriage. I said, God, I have tried to love my husband, and what is that phrase? Oh gosh. Tough love, you know, when we have that phrase, we know, tough love. But tough love has a lot of resentment in it, and bitterness. Or tough love can also be, I'm loving a love that is so good, yet I'm allowing that person to make their own mistakes. That's tough love. It's because it hurts us more than it's going to hurt the other person. It's going to hurt you more because you have to learn yourself what tough love is. But then when I realized all of my ways were wrong, I've tried everything, God, and it hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked out, which means your way must be right. So I let go a little bit there. But I had to learn how to develop the right way, which is God's way. So Jonah has a noon in the middle of his name, is swallowed by the great fish, and kept there for 3 days. The same as when Jesus is put into the tomb, the same as Moses waiting to be put into the water, hidden within a darkness. So anytime you are having that experience, when there is death, there can be resurrection. It always works simultaneously. And that's what we are working for, or working towards, resurrection, right? We have to become the great fish, which represents a resurrected master, someone who has died and who has been born again. And that is the power of noon. The development of Joshua is the son of noon. And in Numbers 27:18 it says, and the Lord said unto Moses, take thee Joshua, Jesus, who is the Savior, the son of Nun, a man in whom the Spirit, and lay thy hand upon him. Oh, lay your hand upon him. Okay, so that is hitting me here today in something. So the word Joshua means salvation. Salvation is the son of Nun. Salvation is Christ. And I've spoken about how your saliva, which comes from the root word salvation, changes. When you are in your purification process, I know in the beginning of mine, your saliva, of course, goes from a state of being really dry to really producing lots of saliva, but also bitter, disgusting, you know. And then I mentioned how it became a cold burn, kind of like Bengay, very soothing, but still noticeable of a burn. And then for a few days, it was really burning, almost very uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable. And I felt it even in my ears, in my nasal cavity, because that's what happens. There's fire in water. Fire is inside of water. Fire is inside of every single element. It's contained in every single element. And then, so you'll see that and feel that. Hopefully, you'll feel that even in your saliva. And so Joshua comes from the power of the noon, the fish. And this is why you also see when he was able to walk on the water and change water into wine, he's able to calm the storm. And he also uses water to heal. He had the power of Mem. Because why? He is the son of Nun. Redemption comes from water, as he spoke to the Samaritan woman. This is also the same thing like I mentioned already about Jacob and the whale. Jacob, of course, we know, turns into, oh, Israel. Guess you heard that. Lots of rain here. I wanted to mention, because I was just thinking about this, when I was downstairs with my husband earlier, a few minutes ago, we have been experiencing like crazy rain in our location for at least 2 years, maybe 3 years now. Crazy rain, to the point that, you know, it's affecting our crops here. And our land here, because of so much rain, is kind of like in a gully, if you will. Our land is at a lower elevation than the two surrounding lands next to us. And it just kind of hit me today. The significance, the symbolism, because everything is a symbolism in your life. The water is pouring into our gully. Their land, the two opposite lands next to us, all of their water is pooling into ours and creating a huge waterway. I mean, you can go, I know my husband has had some experiences growing up, and so has my son, since we've lived here this long in the same household, where if it rains really hard and so much, of course we're flooding here, but they have gone out there and boogie boarded in the rain. That's how much water we get, and it's taking place again, and for me is highly significant. Left and right, Jachin and Boaz, the two twins, Adam and Eve, side by side, and then in the middle is the waterways of the Divine Mother, the waters that we have to conquer, right? So, and be able to walk upon. The first noon is undeveloped and it's incomplete, and so this is what we call it's in Hebrew is called the Nukba, the faces of God. It symbolizes or relates to the body of the tree of life, and is also in relationship to earth and Yesod, or Malkuth and Yesod in the tree of life. Nukba is the bride to be. The bride to be, who you have to be infused with, right? Infused with. The soul must be married to the spirit. Man must be married to woman. And that is our innermost. Something that I have come to develop here recently, in understanding who your soul is. The soul, you're going to develop the soul. The innermost, if you will. You're going to develop the spirit, and 3 parts of the spirit, if you will, here. And I'm going to... So you're going to have to develop the innermost, which is related to your inner Buddha. You're going to have to develop the divine soul and the human soul. These 3 things, of course, is the Holy Trinity. So you develop all 3. Through your cycle and married to each other. The human soul is what becomes the priest who performs the marriage ceremony. Jesus performs the marriage ceremony. That is also kind of like the yoke that becomes attached to Chet, which is highly significant for the Passover, the blood that was put over the door in Egypt. But the only we cannot incarnate any of our aspects of our soul unless it's been purified, 100% purified. And then we have to be born again as the child of noon. So when we have incarnated into our being, or created that union, the Nukva, which is the final noon that is from crown to base. It is the union of perfection, and it is the Tanin. Remember I said that the Tanin contains both noons, and between them is the Yod, which represents, not only does it represent the soul but it's also the point, the dot, the seed, or the hand of God. So God is always in between husband and wife. Do you see that? Highly significant. God is always in between, and then God seals it with his stamp of approval, giving you the blessing, which is the Tov. Oh my goodness. So, see, this is really hitting me today. I don't need to make these videos. I don't need to make these videos. And God is not making me make these videos. I don't know what my future is going to entail when it comes to this, because I'm doing this as a form of honoring God only. But because I'm so blessed and so grateful in my life, I am giving this to you guys because of my overflowing part of love and understanding why our actions matter. That when we are actually having an action, we are actually creating a stamp and a seal that binds the contract that we understand between ourselves, the human soul that God has developed, and then, of course, God through Christ. It's always through Christ. And if you don't accept Christ and don't understand what Christ is, that's something I hope that you can develop and understand. It's an energy source that really is truly most loving, most gracious. It is the only way that we can ascend back and make that connection to God. And God will always know your heart. He will always, God knows the truth if we have accepted Jesus Christ, or Christ, the Christ element within our heart. By our actions. By healing ourselves. So the secret of noon is the incarnation of Christ that only is possible through the direct path. So many people, and this is not to make you honor me and judge another individual, but you see this. And I saw this early on, even if God gave me, a clue here. I want you to work with this individual. Learn from this individual. I had to discern whether or not this individual was of good seed or bad seed. And many of them I thought were really good seeds. But the thing about being a good and bad seed is that your truth will always come out by your actions. And you should just be able to discern. Your heart is going to give you a little edge, a little push, or say, hey, tap you on the shoulder and say, you know what, this is not it. This doesn't feel right. Those not feel right moments. And you really have to still, even if it doesn't feel right, it still could be right. You have to work through that yourself and say, well, okay. Just like I know exercising before, I stopped because it didn't feel right. I was using something good for its wrong energy. It became something that weighed me down and took me out of living a spiritual life. It's all about enhancing the spirit. So there are people who are teaching you about things that don't matter to your spirit. Laws of attraction is one of them. And a lot of these teachers are going to communicate about things that are going on tragically in this reality. And what are they teaching you about the wisdom of it? Awesome. The truth about it. Or are they feeding you fear? And you have to be able to discern within that. And we all have a choice, but a prophet is somebody who takes the straight and narrow path. A saint is still somebody who is working this path, but isn't doing the direct path. They choose to do this path over several lifetimes, and you never go above the heart. You don't ascend, essentially, is what I'm talking. You don't incarnate the Christ and ascend. You have received Jesus as part of your teachings, but now you are still living in a reality, choosing to live in this reality and produce everything that takes place. So followers, people who, of course, follow you, you're seeking wealth, power. That's the difference. And the straight and narrow path is often judged by those who are taking the spiral path, because the spiral path will tell, is your ego that is telling you that the person who is taking the straight and narrow path is wrong. And that's why Christ was condemned and put to death. Jesus, that is, excuse me, was put to death because he was taking the Christic path. But, you know, it's, everyone has a choice on which path it is. And I think you already know. You should already know. I knew early on, because it's always been in my heart. I've always been a real, genuinely good person. But I've been constantly abused and hurt, but yet I still wanted to love. That's how you know which path you're on. So, like I mentioned earlier on in this video, there are people who think it's called woke. I don't really know, and I could be wrong about this term anyway, because I know to become awake, that is, has nothing to do with this reality period. It's awakening to a higher power, in Christ consciousness, essentially, is what it is. But people who think because that they are sharing what is going on really behind the scenes, all these people who are the behemoth here, well, we all are until we have awakened Christ consciousness. There's no way around that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and that's the truth. We are all behemoth, living without the soul, living within sin, living within degeneration of the noon and degeneration, within impurity, until we have incarnated Christ and become. So, when you are feeding negativity out there, you are also getting it in return. Bottom line. So, the more negativity that you share, even though you are convinced that, oh, I got to tell the truth about what's going on, everything that's happening in Hollywood, over here, this tragedy here, I'm going to share this. You're sharing it out of fear. Because if you are somebody on the direct path to waking up, you know there is nothing on the outside source of you that's more significant than your inner source. God is your inner source. And that's the only truth. Sorry, my sister is texting me. She's back home as of Monday, I believe, and she's having a hard time getting through all of this. So the behemoth is something that is really, really, it's a terrible beast, or a very fully negative beast that has great power. You know what it's like when you were negative yourself. I know for me, after my accident, the pain, the depression, the limited mobility, so negative. That negative energy is automatically shared outside of you, no matter what. Even if you think, oh no, I'm really giving these people love. It's there, and it's always attracting the same thing. And that's why when you are in the complete pillar of love, and this is how we develop the eyes of God, truly, that because we have worked with the Christ energies to purify ourselves, giving honor to God through the Heavenly Father and Mother, because of Christ, we reflect nothing but love, which means we only see love in return. To see your soulmate, which means if you are in a relationship, when you finally see your soulmate with loving eyes, you have developed the eyes of God. We're working at that element, because something can always trigger us, because again, our seeds of negativity go on through bloodlines, and then the crossing of bloodlines. I wasn't going to do that in this video today, but since I'm here, that when we cross our bloodlines, we are not only, so a Caucasian person like my dad crossing bloodlines with my mom who's an Asian, you take on the genes or the energies of both, or the sins now, the impurities of both generations. So now not only do I have to work with cleaning Caucasians, the bloodline of the Caucasian genealogy, but also the Asian genealogy. But we all go back to the original source. It was just divided and divided and divided and divided to uncleanliness. In the Psalms of David, Psalm 74, for Elohim is my Melech, which means king of old, working Yahshua, which is our salvation, in the midst of the earth of Nukva, which is our body. Thou didst divide the sea by the strength, thou breakest the Rosh, the heads of the Tanin in the Mayim. Thou breakest the heads of Levi Tanin in pieces, and gavest him meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Thou didst cleave the fountain in the Nahal, which is the flood, that driest up mighty Nahar river. The day is thine, the night also is thine. Thou hast prepared the light and the Shema, the sun. So right there, King David is praising the King, who is, of course, Elohim, who is working towards his salvation through Yahshua, which works through our body. And the Tanin and the Levi Tanin, both are the same things, were harnessed and broken and tamed by God. And when he breaks the head of the Leviathan, or Levi Tanin, in pieces, and gave him the meat for the people in the wilderness, is the same manna that was given into Moses as well. But then Christ is going to give you the same manna, but the manna comes from the superior waters. The manna that was given to Moses was from the inferior waters, if you will. Still necessary, still better than, it's still spiritual food, but not at its highest rate or highest power, because Christ gives it its highest power. Christ was not there in that time. And then thou didst cleave the fountain and the flood. The flood destroyed all impurities, but also saved Noah, which of course begins with Noon. And then everything comes from them. Let's see. So Moses, which works through your heart, when he was done, God, he went away. I mean, he didn't want to be king. Moses did not want to be in charge. He didn't want to be in command. And so he ended up dying in order to serve God. This is somebody who renounces everything. This is the person who is on the straight path, not the spiral path. And this is someone who is called a bodhisattva. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And he does not attach himself to having followers in groups, being a leader, a king, being loved by any other outside source. This is the very, 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 very difficult path. Something that I know I'm working hard, very hard on doing, and it's so painful, and I'm feeling this inside. I'm feeling the pain even right now of what this really means. To love while you are lonely. But when you get to that point of being strengthened by God, loneliness is different than being alone, isn't it? Loneliness is a complete and utter sorrow that really can drain you, really make you depressed. Person who is alone is a singular person, one person, not meaning alone as in suffering or loneliness, alone as in one individual residing among everybody else, here but not belonging, here and loving but not being loved. And it's very difficult. This is a godly love. The person who loves regardless of whatever is being given to them, regardless of what is being offered and done for them. And it's very, very difficult. So Moses was the servant of Jehovah, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of Jehovah. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor. But no man knoweth of his sepulture unto his day. Sepulture is another word for tomb. The same tomb that Christ gets put in. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes was not dim, nor his nocturnal force abated. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning of Moses were ended. And Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him, and the children of Israel hearkened unto him, and did as Jehovah commanded Moses. Something that will happen to you is that God will place his hands upon you. And I hope to make another video about this. But in order to really truly see and become blessed in the eyes of God, is also when you are blessed by God, this is when you have godly eyes. Eyes that see the purity in others, because you are working to complete purification. So Moses ended up dying. So Christie here is dying. Attempting. My physical body, my ego is dying here so that Christ, my salvation can emerge, which is in representation of the new. Moses, by command of God, gave everything to Christ. You hand everything over to a higher power, a greater love within you. And this is what every resurrected master has done and will do. So in the early stages of the path, we create the bodies of the soul, the Merkabah, the chariot of Ezekiel, represented by the holy creatures. And when that work is complete, the initiate faces a few choices. The spiral path, which is still holy. You're still a saint, but you are still living an earthly life. Followers, admirers, powers, advancements here in reality. In the path of the Bodh Hisattva is the direct path, the path of complete bitterness and pain. The road to Calvary, the road that Christ represented when he carried the cross upon his shoulders to be crucified. To pay for one's debts here and now instead of over lifetimes. So you are compiling every lifetime and every impure seed from lifetimes since the beginning of time and purifying it in this lifetime. That's why when you think you are done, you are not done. So don't ever think you're done. So let's see. The difference between the direct path and the spiral path is that the spiral path, it's still your choice. You can always change your choice, but the spiral path always has a danger of completely falling into degeneration when the noon goes into its negative form and becomes Satan. It's only the direct path where you are going to be given life, where the Divine Mother Shekinah helps you and raises it up forward. And you can become an angel or a Buddha. And there's another word that we usually say in relationship to our prayers is Amen. Aleph, Mem, and Nun. When you have Aleph separate from Mem and Nun, Nun is mana, which is a different word for bread, and Aleph is the spirit, works with the top of the tree of life. It is in the form of a dove that you might see in your inner workings. Aleph is formed by 2 yods and a vav, which also work with the lungs, air, of course. So when you put those all together, you have Aleph, Mem, and Nun, the great Amen. You're working with the 3 primary forces of the Hebrew alphabet and the top of the tree of life. You're learning to bring all those forces down and then allowing those forces to rise back up into the Holy Mother. So you have, when you talk about the 3 amens, Aleph is the breath that gives you life. Mem is the waters that can give you life. And Nun is Christ that can give you life, to simplify it. And I'm going to end this video right here and now, and I may come back to it. I have to go pick up my granddaughter soon, so I'm going to get ready for that, and I'll talk to you guys later. This is Christy. Much love, health, and healing your way. I am bringing purpose to your life. Take care.